Jesus' parting words to his disciples were, "Go and make disciples to all nations." Many know this as Jesus' Great Commission. Jesus commissioned all of us, not just career missionaries or church leaders, but all of us to join him in extending his fully alive life to the ends of the world. If Jesus were to come back right now and give us a report on how well we are doing with this Great Commission, would he say, what? If Jesus were to come back right now and give us a report on how well we are doing with this Great Commission, what would he say to us, his church? More importantly, how can you, in spite of your crazy busy schedule, be more intentional and joy-filled as you partner with Jesus in this greatest of missions? I am really excited to have Steve Gladen in the Fully Alive studio this week. Steve's been the small groups pastor at Saddleback Church in Southern California for over 25 years. Saddleback has been one of the most influential churches on the planet, and Steve has traveled the world extending the small group strategy as he goes. I joined Steve on one of these trips years ago and was able to see his servant heart in action. As part of Saddleback's executive team, Steve has the pulse on the Great Commission's activity on a global scale. And as a disciple-making pastor, Steve also knows how to equip everyday people to join Jesus in his Great Commission. I am excited to welcome Steve Gladen, the one and only, into the Fully Alive podcast. Welcome, Steve.
Hey, it's wonderful to be with you, my good friend. And I love how technology can give us an opportunity to catch up with each other. So it's beautiful to be here. And it's a passion area that I love. So super excited to share anything I can to help people move people closer to Jesus. Those that are very distant from him, let's get them a little bit closer each and every day.
That's for sure. Hey, before we dive into some of these more formal questions, just tell us a little bit about yourself. I kind of gave the rundown a little bit about kind of professional stuff, but what about family, hobbies? What are the things you enjoy?
No, very, very fun. So Lisa and I have been married 35 years, and we have two adult kids, 25, soon to be married, and a 22-year-old soon to graduate from college. So praying that I can get them, my greatest hobby is to get them both off the payroll. So excited for the upcoming year to be a powerful year of us getting financially better off. But it's exciting, and Lisa and I love nature, so we love to hike. We love to be outside, outdoors, and Southern California gifts us with the beauty of being able to do that year round. So it's a beautiful time, but it's exciting, and it's one of those things that as a husband, as a dad, that it's fun to see the gospel come alive. And for those of you with young kids, every phase gets better. And so just keep looking forward to it until you're like Brian. And then you're on the other side where you actually have grandkids. So
baby.
You got the spoils of the pain you've gone through with them in their birth through however old.
Yeah. Number 2 is going to talk about podcast dropping. We got number 2, the grandkid. Dropping is probably not the best term to use, but we'll be on their way into our life very soon. I'm very, very excited about that. Steve, it's one thing for you to be a pastor of such an influential church, but you have not just been a pastor in the church, you've been a pastor in your neighborhood. You love to talk about this. I remember being on that trip to Japan with you, and where you lit up the most wasn't talking about strategy of small groups in the church. It was you and Lisa identifying people in your neighborhood and slowly just building relationships and sharing. Any highlights to share just on the front end of the conversation of that part of your journey?
Yeah, I mean, for those of you who don't know, Lisa and I are both first generation Christians. So there is a part of our life where we remember when it was like not to be fully alive in who Jesus made you to be. So there's that snapshot, and then the impact that a small group had in inviting my sister to discover Jesus in a powerful way. And that small group leader, literally, because my sister came home and over the course of time, led every one of us in our family to the Lord, and the spouses and the children. There's a cascading effect that this one small group leader literally changed the destiny of 19 people in our family. And the power of that, kind of sets the stage. So part of, we're Lisa and I are about is that we love to build relationships with people. And now, obviously, I'm a pastor, and generally, the people I work with, they're followers of Christ. Sometimes they don't act like it, but they're still followers of Christ. And so, a lot of you, the longer you're a follower of Jesus, your circle shrinks if you're not careful of who unbelievers are. So you just got to take a tactical, strategic way of just making sure how am I staying in touch with non-believers. And for me, one of the easiest ways is just to get to know my neighbors and do that. So um, as Brian mentioned, I've lived in two neighborhoods since I've been on staff at Saddleback. I mapped them both when I moved on to the cul-de-sacs, and literally just started a journey of getting to know them relationally. The whole cul-de-sac doesn't come to know Jesus right away, but the fruits of just getting to know people and seeing where God's hand is moving within people's lives, and you build the relationship so when there's a crisis, they know who to come to, or when there's a question, they know who to come to.
So
And
good.
so it's fun. I love it. I'm passionate about it. We just had one of our neighbors, just at the time, this filming, but a couple months ago, just accept Christ, and was able to talk to the husband. He goes, "I'm not quite there yet, but,"
Mm.
he goes, "I'm not too far behind." And I go, "That's great. It's all a journey. It's all a step." So being real to people, being a real follower of Christ
Oh
is
yeah.
what it's all about. So many stories I could go on with that, but we could make this a 4-hour podcast very easily.
Well, the beautiful thing is we're going to talk about the Great Commission as like an item, but this is Great Commission as a lifestyle. And
Yeah.
if we just talk about it as an item without being able to really equip people with it as a lifestyle, then it's just another topic to discuss.
Yeah.
And that's not living fully alive. That's thinking fully alive and not living fully
Absolutely.
alive. And just real quick for folks listening to the podcast is, we talk about that in terms of bless, the bless rhythms: begin in prayer, listen, eat, serve, and share.
Mhm.
It's a nice, long, can be very long process of just investing in people and joining in that Abrahamic invitation of God, to Abraham. You're going to be a blessing. You've been blessed to be a blessing. And
Mhm.
we'll put a link to a blog that has the Bless Pocket Guide to it. It's a free resource you can download. We'll put a link to that in the notes, just so that you can have one of the strategies that can help you do exactly what Steve's been talking about.
Mm.
All right, well, let's go kind of talk trends and stuff. You've had
Okay.
as part of your role, I know Rick Warren, former pastor, the founder of Saddleback, initiated the
Mhm.
Peace Plan. You travel all over the world helping build small group networks and things like that. So you've had a front row seat to a lot of global initiatives and partnerships while there at Saddleback. What would you say is the trend of the Great Commission's advancement, both in the United States and abroad? And let's just use a 10 to 15 year window. That gives us enough of a trend.
Well, yeah, and you get a very tactical or a big piece of a trend line in there called COVID,
Oh,
that
there's
totally disrupted the church in that regard. Although I see a lot of positive things that can happen in a disruptive part of what happens in the global area. There is an awakening. There is more than ever a cry for people to make sense out of a very senseless world. So I would say the trend line is there for our grabbing. If I went pre-COVID, I would say that there was a little bit of a lull in the church. If I had to describe something where we kind of did what we did, we were right there and stuff like that. I think COVID disrupted what happened in the church and our rhythms and what we were doing and what we thought people were at. And many people who we felt were like the anchors of the church, we found out how brittle and how transient they were, and just willing to just run and scatter in any direction because of a number of things that happened in that 3-year period of COVID. But here's the exciting news. Coming out of COVID, I think the church is so poised to be able to get back to its roots of what we are always about. And that is about, you know, getting people who are very far from Jesus and getting them closer to who Jesus is. Now, the thing that the church always likes is instant everything. I want
Yeah,
instant
for sure.
growth. I want instant things out. I want instant discipleship. Have you seen that discipleship made? I don't think so. It takes a while. So, but we want things that are instant. But the trend line where I think we've got to get back to is understanding that it is just one by one. It's one life at a time. It is making an impact. The best thing for church growth is for you to get out there and know people who don't know Jesus. Now, do they come to your church immediately? Probably not. I mean, there are the times where I've been in, divine appointments where people have been so ripe and just so ready for what's happening, and where they're at on the Ingle scale or the Gray scale. They've just moved closer to who Jesus was, and they were ready to accept Christ. But by and large, most of the people I meet, they're far from Jesus, and they're just looking for a real person.
Hmm.
And the best testimony for the church is, once I was lost, but now I'm found. And the more we get the church, out of the four walls of the building and into where non-believers are, the quicker the church is going to bounce back. So I'd say the trend line is there for the taking. If you
Hmm.
want to sit sour and soak and say, COVID disrupted my church and look at all the people who left. Well, I wouldn't care about that. I would care more about what did God leave you, and how are you mobilizing them and reawakening them to seeing what the gospel is all about. And what Jesus said in the Great Commission was, go. So how are you going to go, and how are you going to get your people to go? And there's all kinds of things we can talk about with that, but just macro looking at the timeline, that's where I would say I just got back, Brian, from the trip that you joined me on over a decade ago. I just got back, being in Seoul and in Tokyo,
Okay.
redoing conferences and revisiting a lot of the places that Brian and I were at our last juncture, and helping people pick up the pieces and re-engage them where they're at. And it's just amazing that humanity is humanity. I mean, they may be of a different skin color, a different culture, a different language. We're all made in the image of God, and they are basics of basicness that's there. And that's the power of the Great Commission, to be able to say, you center back on what Jesus talked about, and it's a playbook you want to work over and over again. You want to rinse and repeat that in your church.
Gotcha. It's very helpful. Quick question. So, Fully Alive, this podcast is really geared toward everyday people, not church leaders. And
Okay.
so, the that would make sense for a lot of church leaders, I think, to recognize, okay, this is what I need to do in my church. When it comes to everyday people, I think we're all going to be able to translate this well. Let me just play my part. And the point I want to make real quickly as we continue this conversation is, living fully alive involves sharing the fully alive life. It's dessert. It's what I found to be dessert when it comes to
Mm.
living fully alive. We get to share what we've been given, and it's in the sharing that the most joy actually starts to come through. And I hope you're hearing that in Steve's voice big time. Steve, going back to that question, would you say
Or
that that was a global feel of
Yeah.
COVID, that there was a global, like a disconnect, and now on a global sense, where do you see? Because if I'm not mistaken, I want just the everyday folks that are listening to this to recognize that if you have sensed a decline in the Great Commission in North America, that hasn't been true in other parts of the world. Are there like hot spots where the gospel's going? Are there hot spots where the gospel's picked back up after COVID? Or is there any way that COVID affected those hot spots differently than they did North America?
Yeah, I think it's a mindset a little bit more.
Hmm.
When you look at South America, when you look at Africa, there's clearly when their mindset was at a better place to be able to say, hey, they've seen their version of COVID probably for their lifetimes
For
and
all
things
their
like that.
life.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So it may not look like a disease with that, but their perspective is able to help them bounce back quicker than other cultures who have had and have been a little bit more entrenched in what church was, or you have a church building and you have a church mantra and you have church way to go, which is probably in North America and in Europe. and then even some parts of the Pacific Rim that have experienced that. And so it's all a little bit different, but I'm telling you that the harvest is the same
Mm,
any place. And the people that are a little bit more engaging to it, predominantly more in South America and in Africa, you see a greater awakening in a wave because they're not distracted by the things of this world that we have had. And I'd also go on, as in this podcast, that you're talking about. It's to the everyday person. And one of the greatest things I love what Rick wrote in Purpose Driven Life is when he said the Great Commission was not the great suggestion. It wasn't for, pastors and missionaries. It was for everyday people. And that's why in the gospel with Jesus, if you read through the New Testament, it was every member is a minister. So you may be
mhm,
saying, yeah, I'm the ordinary person up there. I'm not up on the platform speaking. But if you're a follower of Christ, every member is a minister. And how are you doing the Great Commission in your life and taking it that next step? And that's where the beautiful part is of being able to go, okay, how am I going? And you may not be going holding evangelistic rallies of thousands of people like a church may do, in Latin America or in Africa, but you may be able to say, have an audience of one.
mm,
And who is the one? Who is the one life? And if you're listening to this, I hope you see that the go for you, the go plan is you want to say, who is one person that doesn't know Jesus that lives close to me that I can impact on a daily basis? And so we can talk more about that as
I love it. I
I love it. I we've you may have already answered this. I'll throw it out there because it's one of the questions that I sent your way. Is just how do you respond to the following statement? The one and only thing that can truly lead to a world revival is for every follower of Jesus to boldly embrace Jesus' gospel in their life and then join Jesus' Great Commission
yeah. I
through
mean,
their life.
unless you're awakened personally and feel that passion of the Great Commission impacting your life, like Lisa and I have felt, we have felt it, and you've felt it too. Those of you who are listening, and it may be decades old, and you may have been raised in a Christian family, but everyone had their own awakening of saying, "Hey, I'm going to make my life sacrificially. I'm going to dedicate it to Jesus." Now, how you take that from being what's encapsulated inside of you and not letting it stay dormant is how do you get around those people that don't know Jesus that were just like you? Because everyone that's listening to this, somebody impacted your life enough to say, I want to draw closer to Jesus. And so you want to be one of those people that's saying,
Mm,
who am I affecting? And what I like to say is, how are you a destiny changer? When we started this episode, we were talking about how a 19-year-old girl invited my sister to a small group. She was a destiny changer. Nita, my
yes.
sister, was her one life. And she ended up changing my dad. I don't even know who this person is. But, when I get to heaven, I'll do what you do. I'll see Jesus, give him a big hug, Paul, Peter, high fives, and all that great stuff. You know, see Adam and Eve and say, you suck. But I'm going to go right after that. I mean, I'm going to go look for this lady and just say, thank you. And that's what you want. You want to get to heaven and hear people
Hmm.
saying, thank you. Thank you for changing my destiny. Thank you for
Yeah.
moving me from once I was lost to now I am found. And that's the most exciting thing you can do, whether it's in your workplace, whether it's in your neighborhood, whether it's in your apartment complex, whether it's on your school campus, whether it's, wherever it's at, you want to be saying, how can I be that destiny changer on this planet?
Mm. All right. Well, let's break that statement down into the two pieces. What does it mean to embrace Jesus' gospel in your life? Because you can only share
Yeah.
what you've been given, right? You can only share what you have. What does it mean to embrace Jesus'
Yeah, and
gospel
that's
in my
that's part of
life?
the sanctification process and part of being a disciple and part of engaging. How does love transform everything that you do? I mean, Jesus' gospels was really clear that, that they'll know us by our love. And so how
Mm,
in who you are, how when you read God's word, how when you pray to God, when those things, how does that saturate your life, that every engagement you have is born out of a deep love for what God loves the most, which is people. It's not the buildings, it's not the cars, it's not the things that you have on this planet, but what he cares most about is people. And so the end part is being able to say, how do I gain more and more and more of who Jesus is? And the only way you do that is by reading his playbook, which is the Bible. And so the more you saturate yourself in it, the more you're going to say, I get it. And then you're going to be able to take it out. Now, a lot of the problem in the church is that we love to learn and how to get in it. And then we totally forget how to do it. And so we become a person that plays in that world. I was doing a evangelism conference, and Brian alluded to, mapping out the neighborhood. And I can remember I was at the conference and I wanted a person to come out of the audience and kind of, experience, do you know your neighborhood, and how do you engage it? And I pulled a person out of the front row, and he came up and he was doing that. And, he really didn't know his neighborhood, but it was an example of being able to say, a lot of people don't know your neighborhood. You don't know a one life. You don't know, and stuff like
Right.
that. And the thing is he came up to me after my session and was just super upset. And the more I discovered what he was upset about, was he was embarrassed. He was all that. And, I'm apologizing over and over again. I didn't mean for it to be like that. But what he was embarrassed about the most is he was the next speaker. And, and
Oh
he
gosh.
had been, he had been doing evangelism so much, he forgot how to practice it. And that's where the in and the through of the statement that you read, Brian, is so important. So often we're in it so much, we forget to actually, we got to do it. And so again, this is a great reminder that you're hearing this podcast, is being able to say, do I have a one life? And if I have a one life, how am I cultivating that one life and moving them forward? It's not going to
Yes,
happen
good
by
question.
accident, because life is busy. And anything you want to do in life, you've got to be strategic about it, or it just is not going to happen.
Hmm. That's real good. Steve, you've used a technical term. I'm going to call it a technical term. I
Yeah.
mapped my neighborhood. We talk about mapping our neighborhood in one of our advanced cohorts called Missionaries Made. But what was a resource for you? Did you read a book, or where did you learn that language, and how can other people get to it without us trying to
Yeah. I
break
mean, in
that
all
down to
honesty,
them?
it's just that I'm just more linear in my approach in life. I mean, I'm a structured person, and just I knew that I need to know my neighbors. And actually, in my first cul-de-sac, the kids were young. And in California, because you have no yards, those of you that live in other places of the globe where you actually have a yard, we don't have one. And so what happens was all the kids gather on the cul-de-sac. What happened was I was getting to know people, but I couldn't retain it. So I had literally had to write down things. And on my phone, I would put, what house number, who was the husband, who was the wife, who were the kids, depending on who it was. But I wanted to keep track of everybody, and then be able to go through is, what's their
Hmm.
spiritual temperature. Now that's part one, but part two is them praying and saying, God, who are you putting in front of me that I can actually build a relationship with, that you want me, you've kind of, the ground is a little bit more available for them, for the seeds of the gospel to be in there. And so part of that is praying and being available for God to use you in any place. And I will tell you this, if you will do your due diligence, like I said, whether it's in the workplace or whether it's in your apartment complex, your campus that you attend classes on, or whatever it is, anywhere that God has given you a geographical area, make sure you know the players that are around you and get to know them in a very specific way.
Hmm.
And then try to discover what's their spiritual story. And, we go through an acrostic of just saying, of walking through acrostic called Speak. And that is, find out their story. And then the P is, what's their passions? And the E is being able to say, encourage them, because people want to be around an encourager.
Hmm.
So encourage them in whatever you hear about their story and how it's playing out. And the A is, are there abilities that they have that you could learn about? And then the K is, what kind of knowledge uh, do they consume, or what could they enlighten you about? But those are ways that you can start the process
It's a
of
great set of
being able to
questions.
say, "Hey, I just met Brian. I met him in class, and in a break, I can say, dude, tell me your story. I just got to know you." And let them pick it up wherever they want to. But it starts a relationship, so you can discover, what God
Mm,
wants to do. So the mapping really didn't come
so
out of
good.
a out
So
of a
good.
book or anything. It just came out of my brain is just real tiny, and so I had to take down
I know that not to be true. Two resources that I'll just mention, and we'll just to make sure we get in the show notes. The Art of Neighboring
Yep.
is a fantastic book that gets real specific on helping you kind of
Yep.
map your neighborhood. And there's a resource called Bless Every Home. I believe it's .com. We'll check that out. I'd rather be engaged in the conversation now than getting the exact details. But Bless Every Home is an online tool that you can actually start to track.
Yeah.
Okay, I've prayed for them regularly, and here's other people that are praying for them. I've had a conversation with them, whether it's Speak or any other kind of helpful tool like that, be able to track those kind of conversations. And it's just a nice little prompt and a reminder to keep this kind of activity in the
Just make
front
sure
lobes as you
just make sure
continue to
when you're
go
using
on.
that software, because it's pulling records from county records or wherever you're at, your census or things like
Census.
that. So
Yeah,
it's sometimes it's right. It's not always not always correct. So just go into with that, practically speaking,
true.
and then don't say your neighbor's name
Good
before
call.
they tell you their neighbor's name, because it's going to weird them out. So just
That's creepy. Good insight. Good insight. Okay, so we talked about allowing the gospel to make us who we are, and then you gave us a great encouragement. Don't let it stay in, because if you stay in, you
right.
really can't be fully alive. That's where things start to go down. It has to be flowing through. It's got to be
Yep.
a river, not a lake, as I've heard so many times. But when you think about kind of the gospel or the Great Commission going through you, there's kind of two ways to do that. I want to break out. One is through the life of a local congregation, and one is not necessarily tied to a local congregation. I'm just going to I gave those to you in two different questions.
Okay.
Let's smash it in one, or take them in order.
Well,
How do
I
you
mean,
respond to
there
that?
there are when you're talking about using through the congregation, there's ways that your congregation can do serve opportunities, and you can engage your community, and you can make yourself known. And part of the church should always be engaging whatever government is around there, saying, "How can I volunteer? How can I help move your agenda forward?" Well, obviously without compromising the gospel, but helping with needy people, because you have a volunteer force, and you want your church to be seen
Mm-hmm.
as a friend of the community, not a goofball of the community. And so, any way your church can engage the community to help them out, and this is the mass of mobilizing people that can do effective things. Like during COVID, our church, became the largest grocery distribution center in Orange County, which is 3.3 million people, and
That's
gave out,
impressive.
tens of millions of tons of food, because the government agencies during COVID were shut down. That was a need. Now, what did we think? We thought, oh, the kids are going to need computers for online learning. But when you talk to the city officials, they're saying, we don't need computers. The government gives us money, or the school has all that. We need food. And so you're like going, oh, simple. So we changed our whole staff around, and everybody became, an aspect of working in the grocery distribution. I mean, I was
Mm,
moving pallets and stocking food and stuff like that, and my small group volunteered every week. And so that is an example of
nice.
the church embracing the community and being light in there. It's you have the mass of mobilizing people, and hopefully your church is really good at that, in looking through, how can we help the schools, how can we help the community, how can we help when there's a sociological problem in our community, or a geographical problem, with a storm or something like that that comes through. So those are tactical
Mm,
things that you can do. But what I'd love to do is focus just a little bit on you, because as we like to say, one drop of rain can't, hydrate a desert, but a million drops can. And if everybody who is a follower of Christ does their one thing, their one life, then you can start to engage with that. We did a church-wide campaign called the One Life Campaign, where we challenged everybody in our congregation to identify their one life and make your one life much more
Mm.
significant in the light of eternity. Again, that's another church-wide program you do. But for you, I would start to say, um, who are the friends that you have that may not know Christ? If there's none, you may want to be able to think about, okay, how do I take that to another level? Who are your family that don't know Christ? That's another way you can personally engage and have a one life. Who are the people you like to have fun with through hobbies? I used to be in a volleyball league back when I
Mm.
could bend around and actually, exercise more. I've gone into less impactful sports. But I was in a city volleyball league where, there were people I'd love to have fun with that I could start to get to know in a special way. One of my neighbors was with me in that, who had later on became a follower of
Mm.
Christ. Who are the Where are the places that you frequent? Do you have a barista that you could start to get to know and let them be a little light into the world? Do you go to a grocery store at the same time through the same line to see the same person, and you can start to get to know them a little bit? The places that you frequent a lot, start to think through, how do I get to know them and be a little bit of Jesus?
That's good.
Um, who are who are the faceless people that God brings to you? Those divine appointments with that.
Mm.
Need another F for workplace. For the factory or the firm that you're a part of. Those six F's.
There you
Those
go. That
six
was
F's.
quick.
Those could be some buckets that you could start to say, do I know anybody who doesn't know Jesus in those things?
Mm.
Now, if you come up goose eggs all the way across the board, no shame, no foul, but make this podcast one where you say, I am going to get to know somebody. When I moved on to the cul-de-sac I live on right now, it was a little
Mm.
bit older. And dude, there were no kids to bring people out. And so to meet people, the only way I could do it was, go to the mailbox when people were there. And so back then I could pay my kids $1 to watch the window every hour. And when somebody went to the mailbox, they would yell at me and I would go, oh, time to check the mail. I would check the mail sometimes 4 times a day so I could just to get to know my neighbor. I mean,
Oh, wow.
so be creative. I mean, during Christmas, or actually when we moved in, our neighborhood wasn't the strongest at this point in the game. But we took neighbors to our neighborhood and, took cookies to our neighborhood and just said, hi, we're the welcome wagon. We moved in and obviously you didn't care about us, but we wanted to take you cookies
Nice.
and stuff like that. Christmas time, there's lots of ways for you to engage the people that are around you. Look at a way to be able to say, who's a name? If you don't know a name, pray about, Lord, how can I get to know him? And then try to figure out, how can I
Mm.
start to build a relationship? Use that speak acrostic to be able to say, how can I just take it
That's
from,
great.
hey, glad to see you at the neighborhood, or you wave to them or things like that. And I use the neighborhood a lot because that's my primary thing. But if it's in your workplace, just don't walk by a cubicle and say hi and stuff like that. Start to, figure out reasons to spend a little bit more time.
Very good. Very, very helpful. And I'm hoping that everybody kind of sees this as
Yeah.
this is just natural.
Yeah.
This is what we do. The more extroverted, I guess, the easier that is, but everybody can
Yeah.
be intentional like this and find a lot of joy in it. Well, Steve, just in your situation there, you've been able to meet and partner with some very influential people. Let's assume some super influential people like that are listening to the podcast. What one or two grand stories of Great Commission impact have you seen that could inspire their
Well, I'll
creativity
do one on
in
the
this
church
area?
level, one on my personal level. On the church level, one of the biggest things we did was change how we would start small groups. And it's evolved in a couple different ways, but the bottom line is so often we spend so much time trying to train a leader and vet a leader and interview a leader that we don't even know what the true quality is for a leader. And if you were to distill down, do I have leadership capabilities? I would ask you is, do you have people you can influence? And if those people could be, friends, and or the modern term would be called friends. And the greatest leadership piece is, do you have followers? And when you have friends that you can have a
Mm.
relevant curriculum with, like we have a curriculum for young parents that is how to raise your kids without raising your blood pressure. We have one for teens that is how to I know,
Nobody needs that, Steve.
or how to
Nobody needs
raise
that.
a G-rated kid in an X-rated world for teens, or in
Mm.
singleness, or in workplace, or different things. When you have a relevant topic that you can use that is video based, you can literally empower anybody to lead a group. Now, there's a lot behind this, and I've written a lot of stuff on it. But my point is that the people who are new followers of Jesus, and ironically, the people who are not followers of Jesus at your church, if you give them a video based curriculum, you can empower them to impact the people that are their friends, which would probably be non-believers. Now, again, these groups aren't put up on the radar, and nobody else can join those groups. And like I said, there's a whole strategy behind it. But what I would say is that if you're a leader, oftentimes what happens is, if I went to any lead pastor that may be, listening to this, and said, would you care if a non-believer came to your church on a Sunday morning with a couple of his buddies, sat in the back of the church? Would that be okay? And everyone would say, in a heartbeat. And I'd say, if those same two or three buddies went out after lunch and talked about your message, would that be okay? And they would say, any senior pastor would go, in a heartbeat. Well, what I'm describing with our two friends strategy is the same way, of only being a little bit more tactical with curriculum, so they can go out and have the mobility to grab their people. And so, and it has turned into a lot of people coming to know Jesus. We have a lot of non-believers in our small groups. And that is one of the great things that you want to see happening, is that you want people who are far from Jesus, who may be scared to come to the church, but also maybe, a little bit more comfortable in the living room. And so I would just encourage you that in a church-wide campaign, and we can put more information in the show notes that can help you with that. But what I want to encourage you as a church leader, that if you're an influential leader, you have the ability to use common things that can help people become closer to Jesus. And one of the classic things we did is that when we started 40 Days of Purpose, which is now called What on Earth Am I Here For? But when we started that campaign,
Hmm.
we had a group that slipped through the cracks, he wasn't a follower of Jesus, but he started a group with some of his friends, and this is how we discovered this strategy. And in every one of our curriculum, we embed a call to Christ. And we were doing a baptism service, and he had come down to me. He had been here, and he was wanted to be baptized. And when I was baptizing him, I just asked him, how long you been at Saddleback? And he goes, 4 weeks. And I go, wow, when did you accept Christ? And he goes, 2 weeks ago. And I go, this is incredible. And one of the things we love at Saddleback is, we'd love for the small group leader to come in, because I noticed he had a group of people. And I said, who's watching this with you? And he goes, my mom and dad are here, and my small group is here. And they all went, ah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. And I wanted to I go, hey, who's your small group leader? I want to pull him in the water with you. And he goes, I'm the small group leader. And I went, how long you been at Saddleback? And he goes, 4 weeks. And I go, how long did you know Jesus? And he goes, 2 weeks ago, I came to know Jesus. And I go, was it at the worship center? Where was it? He goes, no, it was in my small group. And I go, tell me about that. And he
Yeah.
goes, well, when Rick was praying the prayer, he said, if you want to fall after the prayer, he said, if you became a follower of Jesus in this prayer, he goes, I want you to do two things. And he goes, one of them is, tell your small group. And he goes, so I told my small group, and they all went, ah, and they were all happy and stuff like that. And then I go, what was the second thing? He goes, come get baptized. And he goes, so here I am. And then I go, here
Here
you
I
are.
am.
And what we noticed was is that the most excited people about your church, I know I'm speaking to church leadership right now, but some of the most excited people in your church are the people who are just on the doorstep or have accepted Christ because they love what you bring. And generally, it's probably because you're a church that's very loving and stuff like that. So I would just want to encourage you with that. The other thing too is I just encourage you from the standpoint as an individual. There was a guy that I met on my cul-de-sac, and I remember when I met him, I go, "Hi, my name is Steve," and he shook my hand and he goes, "I'm not going to church," and I go, "Okay." I missed your name on that one. One more time. I go, "My name's Steve." He goes, "Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. My name's Brett, and I'm not going to church." And I go, "Brett, not here to invite you to church. Obviously, my neighbors have been talking about me and stuff like that, but that's okay." But I said, "No problem." But over the course of 5 years, we played volleyball together. I was a real person to him and shared highs, shared lows, and stuff like
Mm.
that. And one Monday morning, when I was coming out to my car, he came running across the cul-de-sac and he says, "Do you have a moment?" And I could tell there was some pain in his voice. And I said, "You bet, I've got time for you." I go, "You want to come in the house? You want to go down to a coffee shop?" And he goes, "Let's go to a coffee shop." And a guy who 5 years earlier said, "I'm not going to church," was the same guy that in a coffee shop accepted Christ because
Mm.
he'd done something goofy in his marriage and his wife was going to divorce him. And where I would encourage you that is you're planting seeds all the time. Sometimes you get to harvest them. You know,
Mm.
1 Corinthians 3, 6, and 7 says, "There's some that plant, some that water. It's the Lord that brings the harvest." Sometimes you get to be in that harvest point. And
Amen.
in this story, I got to be the planter, the waterer, and the harvester. But you may not always
Mm.
get that. So you may plant a lot of seeds. You may water a lot of seeds. You may see no harvest. But your job is to plant and water and be Jesus to this planet. It's the Lord that's going to bring the harvest. You may never see the harvest. Marcy, who was the group leader that led my sister to the Lord, she has no idea what I'm doing. She planted seeds, she watered them.
Yeah.
She hasn't seen the harvest. She has no idea who I am and what I grew up to do. And that's my point with you. I want to encourage you that plant and water, leave it up to the Lord. You know, we grew up in a church culture that it was evangelism was always about who did you bring to Jesus? And that's very important. But we didn't spend enough time saying, who are you planting seeds with and who are you watering? And that's where I'd want you
Mm.
to focus in on this. Whether it's for this church strategy of two friends and mobilizing people who are a little bit risky, kind of like first all the letters in the epistles of the New Testament, or if it's you doing it individually, don't get lost on the big picture. The big picture is, trust and obey. If you plant, you water, there's going to be a harvest at some point down the line.
Mm. Mm. It's encouraging. I'm thinking of the few one lives that I have adopted. Some have harvested, some are have some harder shells on them, but I can't help but love them. You know.
Oh, oh, so true.
Well, Steve, this has been great. What have I not asked you that I should have asked you that you're just dying to answer and share about this? Your heart's come
Mm.
out so clear and so beautifully, so thank you for that. But
Now,
what am I missing,
I
if
think
anything?
I think the big thing that I just want to impart, if I can give one last thing, is take a risk. Take a risk.
Mm.
Put yourself out there and into a situation where, say hello and walk over to the person and then all of a sudden say, oh Lord, just help me have the right words and stuff like that. The gospel is all about risk taking. And I would say, be a risk
Mm.
taker. Be a risk taker in your mind to say, who's the one life? And then just step out. Whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. If you're an introvert, this actually plays to you because you like one-on-ones. Get to know somebody one-on-one.
Mm.
So, but I would just want to just encourage you, take a risk. Be a risk taker for Jesus because the thing that keeps me going, people always ask me, how have you lasted at Saddleback for 26 years now? And I go, because I stay close to the water's edge where people get baptized and I hear the stories of them coming to know Jesus. And I stay close to the water's edge because of my friends that I wanted to come to know Jesus. And when I watch my neighbors getting baptized just a couple of months ago, that stuff keeps me going. Running the engine, writing books, speaking at conferences. Brian and I have traveled together. That stuff is okay. But what I got into ministry for, why I'm a follower of Christ, is for the one person who didn't know Jesus, was very far from Jesus, and they came a little closer and a little closer and a little closer till they accepted Christ and was there. So, I mean, be that risk taker. No risk, no reward. So make sure that you do it and just be yourself. If you be you, God will use you.
Yeah, that's a fantastic word. You be you and God will use you. Don't try to be somebody else or somebody else's plan. Like you've got a great tool like Speak and Bless, all these other ways to go about this, but don't forget to be you. Such a powerful word. Steve, when you keep using that word, reach one more, it took me back to, I think, 2001. I'm sitting at Saddleback. I didn't know you yet. I'm just there for the Purpose Driven Conference, and the worship team is singing that Reach One More for Jesus. And I was like, oh my gosh, that has been a theme. And that's why Saddleback's been so influential around not just Southern California and America, but in the world. So thank you for what you do, man.
Thanks for having me on
for
the
who you
show.
are.
It's fun to share and
Appreciate you.
be a part of that. So obviously, if we can help in any way, we want to help you. So Brian's got all my contact info. He'll throw in the show notes. And just remember, I'm on Pacific Standard Time. So if you got a question or a thought, before you dial my cell number that he'll put in there or anything else, just make sure you remember the time zones.
Excellent. And yeah, we'll put some stuff there. We certainly want all those resources that you spoke of earlier, different types of curriculum that people can take into their own living rooms to talk about, how to raise kids, G-rated kids, X-rated world, those kind of things. So I look forward to getting some of that. So Steve, thank you. God bless you guys. Thanks for joining the Fully Alive podcast today.